Alone in the dark woods, ACAL's call for help went unanswered. Silence pressed heavy. Betrayal hung in the air. But when hope seemed lost, a hidden sniper's rifle cracked the night. And one woman's courage would change the battlefield. Forever. Asterisk, if you love thrilling, true-to-life military stories, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our epic tales of courage, sacrifice, and survival. Now, let's dive into the story of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, a SEAL whose desperate SOS went unanswered until a lone sniper changed everything. The rain had stopped just before dawn, leaving the small military town of Silver Creek wrapped in a cool mist. A quiet town tucked against the hills of North Carolina. It lived and breathed the rhythm of the nearby Navy training base. Locals were used to the sound of choppers cutting through the night or gunfire echoing in the distance from the ranges. But behind that steady hum of military life, there was tension, an old kind that never left the bones of a place built around war. At the heart of that tension was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell. Sarah wasn't like the others. She carried herself with discipline, her shoulders squared, her chin held high. At 35, she had the hardened calm of someone who had seen too much and spoken too little about it. Her short dark hair framed a face marked by grit more than glamour. She had the sharp eyes of a woman who had fought for every ounce of respect she had earned and was still being forced to fight for more. She was one of the very few women to push her way through Navy SEAL training. The journey had been brutal. The odds stacked against her from the first day she stepped into Bud S. Men dropped like flies, broken by the cold surf, the endless push-ups in the sand, the bone-deep exhaustion. But she had stayed. She had stayed through the ridicule, through the quiet smirks, through the words whispered behind her back. She's just a token. She'll slow us down. She won't last through Hell Week. But she did. And though she graduated, earned the trident, and wore it on her uniform with pride, the whispers never really ended. Silver Creek's base was her new assignment, a quieter one on paper. Officially, she was here to serve as a tactical instructor, training younger SEALs in marksmanship and small unit tactics. But Sarah knew what it really was. A holding pattern, a way to tuck her out of sight, away from the combat deployments. The men thought belonged to them alone. Out the cafeteria buzzed with low chatter as Sarah carried her tray to an empty table. She heard the laughter before she saw the faces two young SEAL candidates, cocky, still dripping arrogance from training. "Hey, Mitchell," one of them called out, smirking. "You teaching the ladies' aerobics class today?" The other one chuckled. "Nah, man, she's writing the handbook on crying during Hell Week." A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Sarah didn't flinch. She set her tray down and sat, ignoring them. But inside, a slow burn grew. She'd learned long ago that silence was her shield, but silence didn't mean surrender. From the corner of her eye, she caught Captain Donahue, the commanding officer of the base. He was an older man, stiff-backed, with eyes that missed nothing. He didn't join the laughter, but he didn't stop it either. That cut deeper than the jokes. Sarah ate quietly, but her mind was already miles away. She thought of Afghanistan, of the dust, the fire, the weight of a rifle in her hands. She thought of the brothers she had lost, men who had mocked her once, but died trusting her to cover their backs. She thought of the silence that followed every firefight, the kind of silence that carried ghosts. That night, Sarah sat in her small rented house just outside the base. The place was plain bare walls, a worn couch, a table stacked with training manuals. On the shelf sat a single framed photo of her family, her father in his navy whites, her mother holding a baby Sarah, her brother grinning wide. Her father had died when she was 16, a car crash on a wet highway. He'd been her hero, the reason she joined. Her brother, Mark, had followed the same path, but his journey had ended in a flag-draped coffin. Loss had carved her into who she was. Every insult, every dismissal, every cold shoulder only pushed her harder. She wasn't in Silver Creek to be liked. She was here to be ready. But readiness would soon be tested in a way none of them expected. It started 2 weeks later during a live training exercise in the dense woods outside the base. The drill was meant to simulate a hostage rescue. A squad of SEALs would move in, locate the target, and extract them under fire. Sarah was assigned as an observer, her role supposedly limited to evaluating tactics. The squad commander, Lieutenant Harris, was a loud-mouthed man with a square jaw and a habit of calling Sarah ma'am in a way that didn't sound respectful. He dismissed her input before the exercise even began. "We've got this," he said. "Just watch and take notes." Sarah bit back her response and fell into step behind them as they moved into the woods. The drill started, smoothly too smoothly. The enemy role players were scattered, firing blanks, retreating into cover. But Sarah noticed something off. The squad was bunching too closely together, moving loud, leaving gaps in their perimeter. And then it happened. A burst of fire erupted from the tree-lined live rounds, not blanks. Harris hit the ground hard, screaming. Chaos exploded. The role players froze, realizing this wasn't part of the drill. Contact left. One of the SEALs shouted, firing. Blindly, but Sarah had already dropped low, her eyes scanning. She spotted the glint in the distance, a real shooter, hidden deep in the brush. A sniper. Her heart slammed in her chest, but her hands were steady. She pulled Harris back to cover, pressing her hand to his bleeding side. "Stay with me," she said, her voice low but firm. Harris gasped. This isn't training." "No, it's not." Sarah looked around. The squad was panicking, firing wild. Whoever was out there knew exactly what they were doing. This was no accident. This was an ambush. She grabbed the radio from Harris's vest, sending out a desperate SOS. "Silver Creek Command, this is Mitchell. You have live fire. Officer down. Repeat, this is not an exercise. We need immediate support." Static answered. Then silence. Her pulse quickened. She sent the call again. Nothing. The base wasn't answering. The lifeline was dead. She looked at the squad boys, really untested, their faces pale with fear. They needed a leader. They needed her. Sarah's voice cut through the gunfire. "Stay. Low, spread out. Do not fire unless you have a target." They hesitated. "Now." She barked, her tone leaving no room for doubt. Slowly, they obeyed. The sniper fired again, a round tearing bark from the tree beside her. Sarah's mind raced. Whoever this was, they were trained, patient, deadly. And unless help came, they were on their own. She keyed the radio one more time, her voice sharp, carrying both authority and desperation. "This is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell. We are under live hostile fire. SOS. Do you copy?" Silence. The battlefield was quiet to her plea. But deep in the brush, unseen by all, a lone figure shifted. A rifle moved into position. And the tide of battle was about to change. The forest was alive with tension. The younger SEAL candidates, still green, clutched their rifles with hands slick with sweat. Their eyes darted, searching for a threat they couldn't see. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig sent a jolt through their nerves. Sarah crouched low, her shoulder pressed against a tree, her ears straining for direction. The sniper had fired twice, each shot clean, precise, not wasted. This wasn't. At random attack, it was controlled. Whoever was out there was no amateur. She pressed harder on Harris's wound. His face was pale, his breath ragged. Blood seeped through her fingers, warm and sticky. He looked at her with fear he could barely hide. "Mitchell," he whispered, his voice weak. We're sitting ducks." "Not if I can help it," she said firmly. Her eyes swept over the squad. They were young, rattled, looking at her as if waiting for permission to breathe. She could see it, the doubt, the unspoken questions. Why follow her? Could she be trusted? Sarah drew in a steadying breath, her voice sharp and commanding. "Eyes open. Spread the line. Stay low, stay quiet. Nobody fires unless you know you've got the shooter. Panic will get us killed." The tone cut through the fear. They moved slowly, cautiously, spreading out just enough to cover each other. Another shot rang out, striking close too close. Arc splintered near one of the men, who yelped and ducked behind a log. Sarah's eyes narrowed. The shooter was patient, deliberate, testing them. She couldn't see him, but she could feel him. Out there, watching, waiting for one of them to make a mistake. She grabbed the radio again, her voice tight. "Silver Creek Command, this is Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. We are under sniper fire. Repeat, live hostile. Immediate backup needed. Double quote static. Her stomach sank. This wasn't failure of equipment. Someone wasn't answering. For a moment, Sarah felt the weight of her isolation, heavier than the bullets flying past them. She thought of her father, of his words the night before he left on his last deployment. Courage doesn't mean you're not afraid, Sarah. It means you fight through the fear anyway. Her jaw tightened. Fine. If no one was coming, she would handle this herself. She scanned the tree line. The sniper was too good to reveal his position easily. But she'd studied shooters her whole career, studied how they thought, how they moved. She knew patience was their weapon. That patience could also be their weakness. "Cover Harris," she ordered two of the men. "Keep him breathing." Then she moved. Low, steady, sliding from cover to cover, using the trees and underbrush like armor. She ignored the shouts behind her, the protests. "Ma'am, wait, you'll get hit." One of them called, but Sarah didn't slow. The silence was thick, broken only by the sound of distant crows. She reached the edge of a small ridge and froze. Her eyes swept the valley below. Then she saw it a flicker of glass, just barely catching the light. The sniper's scope, her breath, caught. He was dug in across the valley, camouflaged so well she might have missed him if not for the glint. But before she could move, another sound reached her ears, a softer shot, a crack that split the silence differently. A second rifle, and then, astonishingly, the glint disappeared. The hostile sniper's position shifted violently. Sarah blinked. Someone else had taken the shot. The squad behind her erupted in confusion. What was that? Who's out there? Did we get him? Sarah raised her hand for silence. Her heart pounded. She scanned the valley again. But now there were two threats or two players. At least. Slowly, carefully, she led the men back into stronger cover. Harris groaned as they moved him, but he was still breathing. She knelt by his side. "Stay with me," she murmured. "You're not done yet." But her eyes flicked back to the tree line. Somewhere out there was a second shooter, a ghost. And, unlike the first, this one wasn't aiming at her. This one had just saved them. For the next hour, the forest was a standoff. The hostile sniper didn't fire again. Whether he was dead or had retreated, Sarah couldn't be sure. But she knew they weren't safe. They needed extraction. Again, she tried the radio. Again, no response. Frustration twisted in her chest. Why? Wasn't command answering? Was the signal being blocked? Or was someone deliberately keeping them in silence? Her squad was restless, murmuring, their nerves fraying. She knew the weight of command, the way fear could spread like wildfire. If she cracked, they would too. She forced her voice steady. "Listen up. We don't know how many hostiles are out there. Could be one, could be more. We stay together. We move slow. And we don't lose our heads. Ma'am, one of the younger men said, his voice shaking. What if no one's coming? Sarah looked him straight in the eye. Then we bring ourselves home. That seemed to calm him. A little dot as night crept in. The air grew colder. The forest pressed tighter around them. Every shadow looked like movement. Every snap of a branch sounded like death dot. And then, just as Sarah's hope of extraction thinned, a figure appeared in the distance. Low, moving with precision, almost melting into the trees. The squad stiffened, raising their rifles. Sarah raised. Her hand. Hold. The figure drew closer, silent, deliberate. And then, through the gloom, she saw the outline of a sniper rifle slung across the shoulder. Her breath caught. The figure stopped a dozen yards away, lifting a hand in signal. Not hostile. Not enemy dotted was him, the lone sniper who had fired that second shot. He didn't speak, not yet. He simply studied her, his face hidden beneath a hood, eyes sharp and unreadable. For a moment, the world still dot Sarah realized then that her desperate SOS had not been answered by command, by radios, or by the men who doubted her. It had been answered by him. And whoever he was, he had just changed the battlefield. The man didn't rush forward. He stayed still, half-shrouded by the trees, his rifle slung low, his body angled in a way that showed discipline rather than threat. Sarah studied him with a soldier's eye. Every detail mattered. The deliberate way he moved, the lack of wasted motion, the careful awareness in the way his boots pressed the ground. This wasn't some drifter with a gun. This was training, military grade. But whose side was he on? The younger SEALs behind her shifted nervously. One whispered, "Is he friendly?" Another muttered, "Could be bait." Sarah didn't answer right away. She raised her rifle, not at him, but angled just low enough to signal caution. The man responded by lifting both hands, palms open, in a silent gesture of truce. Then, slowly, he reached up, pulled back the hood, and revealed his face. He was older than Sarah expected. Late 40s, maybe 50. His skin was weathered, his beard peppered with gray. But his eyes, sharp, clear, and watchful, were unmistakably alive. The kind of eyes that had seen combat and never truly left it. The man spoke finally, his voice calm but edged with gravel. "You're a long way from safe ground, Commander." Sarah stiffened. He knew her rank. That wasn't random. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Name's Cole," he said simply. "Doesn't matter much beyond that. What matters is if I hadn't taken that shot, you'd have lost more men." Her squad murmured, glancing between them. Relief mixed with suspicion in their faces. Sarah kept her stance firm. "Why are you here?" Cole's expression was unreadable. "Because someone had to be. And it looks like your people back at base don't want to hear your call for help." Her heart tightened at that. He'd confirmed what she had feared, but hadn't dared say aloud. "You heard the radio?" she asked. "Every word." "Then why isn't command responding?" Cole's jaw worked as though chewing over what to reveal. "Because sometimes the enemy isn't just in front of you. Sometimes it's behind the desk, wearing the same uniform." The words cut like a blade. Sarah felt the men behind her bristle, shifting uneasily. She wanted to argue, to insist that command wouldn't leave them out here. But deep down, she knew. She had felt the coldness in Captain Donahue's gaze. She had lived through the dismissals, the mockery, the subtle walls, built around her career. And no silence on the radio when her squad was bleeding. It wasn't just an oversight. It was something darker. Sarah drew in a slow breath. "We need to move. Harris won't last much longer without real medical care." Cole nodded. "Then, follow me. I know a way out that isn't on your maps." The squad hesitated. One of the younger men, Daniels, shook his head. "Ma'am, how do we know we can trust him? For all we know, he set this up." Sarah's gaze swept over the boy. His fear was written plain, but his doubt was honest too. She weighed it carefully. Finally, she said, "Because he didn't have to take that shot. If he wanted us dead, we'd be dead." Daniel swallowed, but said nothing more. Cole studied Sarah for a moment, as though measuring her, testing her words against her eyes. Then he gave a short nod. "Stay low," he said simply, before turning into the trees. Sarah motioned for the men to follow. She fell in close behind Cole, her senses sharpened. Every step carried risk. The forest was quiet now, but quiet didn't mean safe. Quiet meant something was waiting. They moved through the underbrush, Sarah keeping count of every shadow. Harris groaned now and then, his breathing shallow as two men carried him on a makeshift stretcher. Time was running out. At last, Cole led them into a narrow ravine, where the thick canopy blotted out even the stars. He raised a hand for them to stop. "This path'll keep you hidden," he said. "But you need to know something." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "What?" Cole looked directly at her. "That wasn't just some rogue sniper out there. That was a hired gun. A contractor. And if there's one, there are more. You're not dealing with a drill gone wrong. You're dealing with a setup." The words landed like a THUNDERCLA. "P. The squad muttered in alarm. One cursed under his breath. Another gripped his rifle tighter. Sarah felt the weight of it sink into her chest. A setup. That meant command knew, or worse, command had allowed it. She forced her voice steady. "Why would they do this?" Cole's expression hardened. "Because there are people in high places who don't want you here, Commander. You're proof of something they'd rather deny. And proof makes enemies." Sarah's breath caught. She thought back to the cafeteria laughter, to Captain Donahue's silence, to the way her deployment orders had been quietly rerouted to this base, far from the front lines. The insults hadn't just been petty cruelty. They had been warnings. She stared into the darkness of the ravine, her jaw set. She would not be broken by this. Not by bullets, not by silence, not by betrayal from within. But she also knew the truth. They weren't out of danger yet. Cole moved ahead, signaling them onward. Sarah followed, her mind burning with anger and determination. Every insult, every dismissal, every unanswered call for help, it all built into something fierce inside her. She wasn't just leading this squad out of the woods. She was walking them straight through the heart of betrayal. And when she came out the other side, she would not come out silent. The ravine swallowed them whole. Its walls rose steep and jagged, lined with moss and roots that reached down like fingers. The canopy above was thick, choking out the pale moonlight until the squad moved in near darkness. Their boots crunched on damp stone, the echoes bouncing back in ways that made every sound feel closer than it was. Sarah's senses sharpened. Darkness was a liar. It made men hear footsteps that weren't there, made them see shadows twist into enemies. She had learned long ago not to trust her fear. Fear could paralyze. Fear could kill. Harris groaned again, his face pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. The two men carrying him on the makeshift stretcher were slowing, their shoulders sagging. Sarah dropped back, moving alongside them. "Switch every 100 steps," she ordered. "Don't burn yourselves out." One of the men nodded quickly, relieved to be given something solid to follow. She could feel their eyes on her, weighing her words, judging her strength against the fear gnawing at them. And she knew, if she faltered now, even once, they'd lose faith. Cole moved ahead, like he had walked this path 100 times. His rifle hung loose across his chest, but his eyes never stopped moving. He paused now and then, lifting a hand, tilting his head to listen. Each time, the squad froze, hearts hammering, waiting for the whisper of danger. Once, when a branch snapped in the distance, Daniels nearly fired, his finger tightening on the trigger. Sarah's hand clamped down on his rifle before he could. "Easy," she whispered. "Don't let the dark trick you." Daniel's face was tight, young, his breath fast. "I don't like this, ma'am. It feels wrong, all of it." Her voice softened just enough to reach him. "It is wrong. That's why we stay sharper than the ones hunting us. Trust your training. And trust me." For a moment, his eyes held hers, doubt wrestling with belief. Then he nodded, and the rifle lowered. Sarah released a breath slowly. Command might have sent them here to fail, but she would not let these young men crumble. Not on her watch. Hours bled together as they moved deeper into the ravine. Harris's breathing grew shallower. Each rasp cut into Sarah's chest like a blade. She had seen death many times, but not like this. Not so slow, not so helpless. Finally, Cole raised a fist and brought the group to a halt. He crouched, scanning the walls of the ravine. Then he motioned Sarah forward. She joined him silently. "What is it?" she whispered. Cole's eyes narrowed on a patch of rock up ahead. Barely visible in the dim light were marks in the dirt. "Not natural, not random. Tracks. They know where you are," he said quietly. "And they're waiting." Sarah's heart sank. "Ambush?" Cole nodded once. "Professional. They're not chasing. They're hurting." She clenched her jaw. It confirmed what she already feared. This wasn't chaos. This was planned. The silence on the radio, the hired gun, the betrayal back at base. It was all a net, and she and her men were the fish. Caught inside it, she looked back at her squad. They were exhausted, frightened, running on fumes. Harris was slipping away. And yet, their eyes found hers. Not Cole's. Hers. This was her burden. Her fight. She turned back to Cole. "Then we break the herd. We don't play their game." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. He gave a faint nod. Together, they studied the terrain. The ravine curved sharply ahead, narrowing into a choke point, perfect for an ambush. But Sarah saw something else, too. A jagged rise to the left, half covered in vines. It would be brutal to climb, but it led to higher ground. She pointed. "There, we take the ridge. If we move quiet and fast, we might get above them." Cole studied it, then her. "That's a hard climb with wounded." Sarah's voice was steady. "Hard is better than dead." For a long moment, the two soldiers, one worn by years of shadows, the other hardened by years of dismissal, held each other's gaze. Then Cole gave a short, approving grunt. "All right, Commander." "Your call." Sarah moved back to the squad. "Listen up. We're changing course. We climb. It's going to hurt. It's going to burn. But it's our best shot to stay alive." The men exchanged uncertain looks. Daniels frowned. "Ma'am, we'll never get Harris up that." Sarah's voice cut firm, but not unkind. "Then we do it anyway. We carry him. He's one of us. No one gets left behind." The words settled over them, quiet but solid. One by one, they nodded. The climb was brutal. The rock was slick, the vines tearing under their weight. Harris moaned as they hauled him upward. The stretcher tilted at impossible angles. Muscles strained, boots slipped, hands bled. But Sarah climbed at the front, her jaw tight, pulling herself higher with every ounce of strength. At one point, Daniel slipped, nearly tumbling backward. Sarah caught his arm with a grip like iron, teeth gritted. "Hold on," she growled. "You're not falling on my watch." He stared at her, wide-eyed, then scrambled back into place. Minutes felt like hours, but finally they dragged themselves over the lip of the ridge. The forest spread before them, darker and wider, but freer. Below, the ravine lay quiet, too quiet, and then, from the shadows beneath, came the crack of a rifle. The ambush had sprung, but too late. The trap had snapped on an empty path. Sarah, crouched low, heart hammering, watching flashes of gunfire below. The enemy thought they were still in the kill zone. Cole's lips curled in the faintest of smiles. "Smart call, Commander." But Sarah didn't smile. Not yet. Harris's breathing was shallow, weaker than ever. And somewhere out there, more hunters were waiting. She stared into the darkness of the forest ahead, her hands steady on her rifle. They weren't safe? Not by a long shot, but she had led them this far. She would lead them farther. And when the truth finally came to light, when the betrayal was exposed, the silence that had once mocked her would be broken forever. A forest stretched wide and endless, swallowing the squad in shadow. Every branch seemed to whisper. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. Sarah moved at the front, eyes scanning, her rifle steady. Behind her, Harris's labored breaths grew. Fainter, each one scraping like sandpaper across her nerves. They needed shelter. Somewhere to stop, to breathe, to try to save him. But the woods offered nothing but thorns and darkness. Cole appeared at her side, silent as always. His presence carried no wasted movement, no sound beyond the crunch of his boots. He spoke low, just for her. "He won't make it much longer." Sarah's throat tightened. "Don't say that." Cole's gaze held hers, calm but unflinching. "I've seen wounds like that. Too much blood lost. If we don't get him help soon," her jaw locked, "then we do whatever it takes to keep him alive." For a moment, Cole studied her with those sharp, unreadable eyes. Then he gave the faintest nod, as if testing her resolve, and finding it unbreakable. They pushed on until the squad stumbled into a clearing where fallen logs formed a rough circle. It wasn't much, but it gave them cover. Sarah ordered them to stop, set him down. "Daniel's with me. We need to check the wound again." The young man obeyed, kneeling beside Harris, as Sarah tore open what remained of the bloody bandage. The sight made her chest twist. The wound was ragged, deep, too close to the artery. She pressed her hand firmly against it, ignoring the heat, ignoring Harris's groan. "Stay with me, Lieutenant," she whispered. "You're not quitting now," Danielle's voice cracked. "Ma'am." "He's fading." Sarah snapped her eyes up at him. "Then we don't let him. Do you understand? We hold the line. For him." Daniel swallowed hard, then nodded. Cole crouched nearby, watching. Finally, he spoke. "There's a safe house about 3 clicks north. Hunter's cabin. Old one. It's not much, but it'll give you shelter, and I've got a kit stashed there. Supplies. Blood stoppers?" Sarah's head snapped up. "You had supplies this whole time?" Cole's tone didn't shift. "I don't carry everything on me." "Makes you slower. You want him to live. We get there fast." Sarah's suspicion flared, but she buried it. She didn't have the luxury of mistrust, not now. Harris's life was slipping through her fingers like water. "Then lead the way." She said. The trek north was agony. Harris drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering nonsense, his skin clammy. The men grew quieter, the weight of fear pressing heavier with every step. Sarah kept her eyes forward. She couldn't let them see the storm inside her, the grief, threatening to claw its way out. She thought of her brother, Mark, who had bled out in a desert thousands of miles from here. She had been told she couldn't save him, that it wasn't her fault. But guilt had never left her. Now Harris was in her hands, and she would not lose him. When Daniel stumbled again, gasping, Sarah took his place at the stretcher without hesitation. Her muscles burned, Her shoulders screamed, but she bore the weight. One of the men whispered, "Ma'am, let us—" "No," she cut him off. "I carry him. Keep your eyes on the trees." The message was clear. She wasn't just giving orders. She was proving them wrong, proving she could carry just as much as any man beside her. Cole walked a few paces ahead, guiding, but Sarah noticed the way his eyes flicked back to her now and then. Not in doubt, not in mockery, but in something closer to respect. At last, the cabin appeared, a squat, weathered thing tucked against the slope of a hill. Its windows were boarded, its roof sagging, but to the squad it looked like salvation. Cole moved ahead, rifle raised, checking corners before signaling them inside. Sarah followed, the stretcher bumping over the threshold. The air smelled of dust and pine. Old hunting trophies lined the walls. A rusted stove sat cold in the corner, but on the table lay a small kit, gauze, antiseptic, a single vial of morphine. Cole grabbed it and set it beside Harris. "It's not a hospital," he said, "but it might keep him breathing." Sarah rolled up her sleeves. "Then we make it enough." For the next hour, she worked with steady hands. She cleaned the wound, packed it, pressed until the bleeding slowed. She injected the morphine, whispering steady encouragement into Harris's ear. "You're not done, Lieutenant. You'll walk out of this forest. You hear me? You will walk out." The squad watched in silence. The only sounds were Harris's ragged breaths and Sarah's calm, unshaken voice. When at last the bleeding slowed, Sarah sat back, her body shaking with exhaustion she refused to show. Harris was alive, barely, but alive. The men exhaled, some of them whispering prayers. Cole leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching. Finally, he spoke. "You don't quit, do you?" Sarah's eyes met his. "Never." He studied her for a long moment. Then, with a quiet sigh, he said something she hadn't expected. "I used to wear the uniform too, long before you. Walked away when I realized the fight wasn't always out there. Sometimes it was in the halls, in the silence. You're living that truth now." Her chest tightened. "Why help us then? If you walked away?" Cole's eyes hardened, memories flickering behind them. "Because I've seen good soldiers left to die for politics. Because I've been the one screaming into a dead radio. And because," he paused, his voice dropping lower, "because you remind me of someone I failed to save." The words hung heavy in the cabin, raw and unguarded. Sarah wanted to ask more, but a noise cut through the silence, the distant crunch of boots on leaves. Her head snapped toward the boarded window. The squad stiffened, rifles raising. Cole grabbed his rifle, his voice flat and certain. "They found you." Sarah's heart pounded. The cabin had bought them time, nothing more. The enemy was closing in, and this time there would be no room to hide. The sound came first, the crunch of boots on pine needles, faint at first, then louder. Branches snapped, voices murmured low in the night. The squad froze in the cabin, every breath held, every rifle raised. Sarah crouched near the door, her finger on the trigger. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but her hands were steady. She had trained her whole life for chaos like this. Cole knelt by the window, his sniper rifle resting on the sill. He didn't look rattled, not even a flicker. His calm steadied her more than she wanted to admit. "They've surrounded us," he said in a low growl. Professional spacing. 5, maybe 6 men, could be more. Daniel's voice cracked. "Ma'am, we can't fight them all." Sarah's eyes snapped to him. "We're not dying quiet in this cabin. We fight smart. We fight together." The men nodded, fear in their eyes, but something else too. Belief. Cole gave Sarah a long look, then said quietly, "I'll take the high ground. Thin them out before they close in. Hold them steady here." Sarah studied him for a heartbeat. You come back. He gave a faint smile. That's the plan. Then, like smoke, he slipped out the back. The minutes stretched thin. Harris lay on the floor, unconscious but breathing, his chest rising shallow. Sarah stayed crouched by the door, listening, her heart pounding with the silence before the storm. Then the storm broke. Gunfire cracked from the trees, sharp and fast. Bullets slammed into the cabin walls, splinters flying. The men ducked low, returning fire through the boarded windows. Sarah shouted over the chaos, her voice cutting like steel. Controlled bursts. Don't waste your rounds. Another shot. Split the night, not from the attackers, but from Cole's rifle. One hostile went down with a scream. Another shot followed, clean and precise. The squad roared with renewed courage. Daniels grinned fiercely, firing steady now. He's out there picking them off. But Sarah knew better than to celebrate too soon. For every enemy Cole dropped, more pressed forward. The squad's ammunition was dwindling. Harris moaned, his life still bleeding away inside the fragile cabin. Her mind raced. They couldn't just hold. They had to break the siege. She grabbed Daniels and another man. Cover me. We flank left, draw their fire. Cole will take the rest. Daniels. Eyes widened. Ma'am, that's suicide. That's an order. She didn't wait for an answer. Kicking the door open, she charged into the night. Gunfire erupted instantly, the crack and snap of bullets slicing past her ears. She dove behind a fallen log, firing back, every shot measured, precise. The squad followed, pouring out of the cabin like fire breaking free. Chaos filled the clearing, shouts and gunfire blending into one furious storm. And through it all came Cole's rifle, steady, deliberate, each shot changing the tide. Sarah moved like a force of nature. She shouted commands, pulled one of the younger men to cover when he froze, fired until her rifle clicked empty, and slammed in a new magazine without hesitation. She was everywhere. Shield, sword, leader. And then silence. The gunfire stopped. Smoke drifted through the trees. The enemy was gone, the ground littered with the bodies of hired guns. The squad panted hard, their faces streaked with sweat and dirt. They were alive. Against every odd, against betrayal and silence. Alive. Cole emerged from the shadows, calm as ever, though his rifle barrel smoked faintly. His eyes met Sarah's. You held them, he said simply. She shook her head. We all did. The quiet after battle was always the hardest. Harris still clung to life, but barely. The squad was worn thin, their nerves frayed. And the biggest question hung heavy in the air. Why had command left them to die? Sarah knelt beside Harris, brushing dirt from his face. Then she rose, her voice hard. We're not crawling back to that base in silence. Not after this. They left us to die out here. And when we walk back through those gates, the truth goes with us. The squad murmured agreement. Cole stepped closer, his voice low. Be careful, Commander. Exposing them won't be clean. Men like that bury truth deep. They'll come for you when you speak it. Sarah met his eyes, her own burning with resolve. Let them. I've fought my whole life to be heard. I'm not stopping now. For a moment, Cole just studied her. Then, almost reluctantly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, battered recorder. What's that? Sarah asked. Insurance. He said, I've been tracking these contractors for months. Their pay, their orders, it all points back to Silver Creek's command. Captain Donahue's name was on it. Everything you need to prove the truth. Sarah stared at him, stunned. You knew. Cole's eyes were heavy, haunted. I knew. But I needed someone brave enough to stand up and carry it where I couldn't. You're that someone. He pressed the recorder into her hand, got her fingers closed around it. Cold metal, heavy with truth, and in that moment, the silence that had mocked her since her first day on base shattered. She wasn't just a woman to be doubted, mocked, or dismissed. She was the commander who had led them out alive. The men looked at her differently now. No smirks, no whispered doubts. Only respect. Daniel straightened, his voice strong. "What are your orders, ma'am?" Sarah lifted her chin. "We take Harris home. Then we bring the truth into the light." Days later, Silver Creek Base stirred with rumors. A battered squad marched back through its gates, Harris alive on a stretcher, Sarah at the front. Behind her, Daniels and the others carried not just the scars of battle, but the unshakable truth of what had happened. And when Sarah Mitchell stood before Captain Donahue, eyes hard and steady, and laid the recorder on his desk, the silence that had once surrounded her was gone forever. For the first time, her voice carried, and the world had no choice but to listen.